What's going on, YouTube world? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in once again. I'm Dusty, and this is the Shred Academy. Today, we're going to be continuing a mini-series that we just started that we didn't even realize was going to be a mini-series, but we absolutely love it. Are you a passenger or a pilot? We're going to do a number of scenarios. Today, we're going to cover jumping. Are you a passenger or a pilot? And if you are a pilot, are you a good pilot or a bad pilot? Does your bike want to fly with you? Before we get started, I would like to ask for a little bit of help to get myself to Hendersonville, North Carolina for the rest of the winter. I am currently a little stranded in Virginia after Thanksgiving, and I'd love just a little bit of help getting there. I'd really appreciate it. Just like Oliver Malin did, I really appreciate your help, man. Thank you so much. Now, on to the content. Now, what is a passenger and what is a pilot? A passenger is more or less somebody who's just along for the ride and isn't interacting with the bike at all, going up or off the lip, oftentimes resulting in them going OTB after getting bucked by that rear suspension. If this is you, stop here, go out and check out any of my how-to jump videos. I'll put one link right up here, but there's a whole bunch and there'll be more to come. But more importantly, let's assume that you are a pilot. Are you a good pilot that your bike wants to fly with? Are you a bad pilot that your bike wishes you would just stay on the ground? Now, to find out which you are, we're going to break down a bike's path going up the lip and then its intended flight path. And we're going to find out whether you're having positive interactions with your bike that are having positive effects on its flight path, and as well you're controlling those things. Or are you having negative effects on your bike's flight path by your interaction with the bike going up the lip? To get started, again, let's check out the bike's intended flight path. Before we find out what a good interaction with our bike is going to be, let's find out what our bike does as it goes up and off of a lip. Now, I'd like to preface this by saying I did my best to not have any real interaction with the bike here and keep myself safe. The one thing that I made sure I did was I accepted the lip, which is me doing this right here, just the slight angle change of my body. So let's continue. What does the bike do? Now, right now we can tell the bike is more or less at suspension rest, right? Just into its normal sag. Now, as I enter the lip, the fork compresses on its own as it starts to go through this transition. As my rear suspension enters this transition point, it is now as well going into its travel along with the fork. As the bike continues through this compression, notice how the bike starts to sink into its travel on its own without any rider input. Just the sheer G-forces of pushing down into the lip are creating this suspension preload. As the bike starts to reach the top of the lip, notice how the fork is starting to rebound slightly as it reaches the edge of the lip. Right as the front tire reaches the edge of the lip, notice the fork has completely released all of its travel and is back to its full extended state. The rear suspension, however, is still being pushed in farther into its travel. The front tire now is going to continue up at the same angle of the ramp while the rear tire continues to travel up the ramp to the edge of the lip. notice the rear suspension will rebound and give a small extra boost to the rider who is and give us notice the rear suspension starting to rebound, giving the rear end of the bike a little extra boost. Now this flight path is now going to go up, and once it reaches the other side, it'll start to fall. The flight path of the bike is more or less a negative of the lip of the jump. Now that we've found out how our bike interacts with the lip of a jump and leaves the lip of a jump, let's look at a few ways you can negatively interact with your bike going up the lip, and we'll see the results. Our first negative way to interact with our bike going off the lip of a jump is the stand up to the jump method. Let's find out why. As the rider approaches the jump, he's fine in a relaxed attack position. As he enters the lip, notice that the rider does somewhat accept the upwards angle of the lip, accepting the transition. Now, as the rider reaches mid-transition, you'll see him explode straight up, and he becomes completely weightless, both front tire and rear tire at the same time. The rider has given himself to gravity as the bike is trying to complete its exit off of the ramp. As the rider continues in the air and the bike rolls off of the top of the lip, notice the rider start to fall into the bike as the bike is trying to go up in the air. These are two counteracting forces which result in loss of bike control as the bike is trying to go up and your body's trying to come down. As well, the rider is adding a full bike length to this jump as he is fully unweighted before the front wheel has really even left the jump. That means he needs to pick the bike up as it completes its way up the actual ramp itself and then carry across to the other side to the landing. This flight path is very up and down instead of very elongated curves or arcs. Lastly, if this were a steeper lip and the rider were to unweight completely all at one time before the bike has actually left the lip at all, as the rear wheel tries to carry up the lip, it's not going to have any pressure against it, pushing it the rest of the way up the lip, so it will get hung up and cause the rider most times to go OTB. Another way to have a bad interaction with the bike as it goes up the lip is to jump up the lip and not off the lip. This does look a lot like standing up to the jump, but happens a lot earlier on the lip. As the rider approaches in his relaxed attack position, notice the rider doing a forceful body preload down into the bike right before he enters the lip. Right there. Hard impact. Notice how far my suspension has preloaded and my bike isn't even halfway on to the jump yet. Now, as the rider enters, the bike is now rebounding up as the rider is trying to jump up this way. The bike is actually rebounding back that way. Now, just like standing up to the jump, the rider's body will fall as soon as it leaves the lip as the bike is trying to go in the air, causing two opposing forces. If this were a steeper lip,
The rider trying to jump up the ramp would actually definitely get hung up by the transition and have a much greater chance of going over the bars as well. The rider is having a negative interaction with the bike because he's forcing the suspension down here as it releases in the middle of the ramp, and as well having negative impacts on the flight path as the rider is falling down onto the bike as the bike is actually trying to take flight and complete its arc across the jump.
Now that we've seen some negative ways to interact with your bike might be scared to fly with you. Let's look at a way to correctly pilot your bike to have control throughout the jump and have positive interactions with your bike and its suspension going up and off the lip.
We learned earlier that as the bike enters the transition, the front suspension will start to compress and then followed by the rear suspension. Front suspension compressing. Now, as the rider accepts this transition by changing his body angle slightly, the rider shifts his weight into the back of the bike to continue the compression of the rear suspension. As the bike and rider travel towards the edge of the lip, the rider will then use his body weight to create a counterweight to keep the front wheel traveling up at its intended path. This counterweighting also adds more rear suspension preload. Now, as the front tire starts to continue up on its path off of the transition of the ramp, the rear tire will have to continue traveling up the rest of the ramp and then leave the ramp trajectorying into the air off of the very top. Now, as the rider reaches almost to the top of the ramp, you'll notice that he starts to shift his weight up and forward over the top tube so that the rear suspension can start to rebound as he leaves the jump, giving him a little extra push in the air. Right there. Now you can see the rider pull himself further up and forward, and he is traveling up in the air along with the bike traveling up in the air. They're both consistently traveling up in the air. They're not counteracting forces. Front tire leaves, back tire leaves. The rider and on the bike are on the same flight path. And as the bike starts to fall, so does the rider. And they can be in sync on the landing because they left the lip in sync. Front tire leaves first, front tire comes back first, and then the rear tire. So what are the positive interactions that we're having on the bike? The positive interactions are not forcing the front suspension into the ramp that is already going to compress it. We can save our energy and save the bike from trying to rebound forcefully as it's going up the ramp. The second positive impact we're having is as the front wheel is starting to unweight as it reaches the edge of the ramp, we're adding pressure to that rear suspension and keeping weight on this rear tire until it reaches edge of the lip. This is keeping the bike on its natural flight path of leaving front wheel first, continuing up at the same angle or a little greater as the edge of the lip, and as well continues the rear wheel travel up the lip until finally it can start to release its compression at the very last bit of the ramp. This is aiding the bike in its flight path of a nice tall arc instead of being very up and down, and fighting the bike as it tries to go in the air. Having a positive interaction with the bike going up and off the lip will almost always result in a positive flight path and a positive interaction with the bike upon landing. Becoming a pilot, not a passenger. Controlling the bike and not letting the bike control you.
Well, guys, that's going to do it for Are You a Passenger or a Pilot off of Jumps. We hope that you enjoyed the channel. We hope we didn't offend you at all by calling you a passenger. We only want you to get better and be safe. If you enjoyed the content, please let me know in a comment. And as well, if you'd love to support the channel and see us thrive and grow, please become a Patreon. The lowest level is just 37 cents a day. We also have our PayPal tip system. It's more or less like buy me a gallon of gas or two. We'd really appreciate it. You're going to help me get to my next destination so I can keep creating this content that I hope you're enjoying. Lastly, if you'd like to buy some merch, we have a limited supply left. There's a link in the description. You're seeing a few pictures now. If I don't see you until the next video, make sure that you ride hard, ride safe, and be kind to everyone. We're all in this together. If you do happen to see me on the trails, say hello. I'd love to hear why you love to mountain bike and a little bit about your mountain biking story. You may make it on the channel. So until next time, guys, rubber side down. My bike's right here. We'll get going.